The History of America is a comprehensive series of videos that ranges from the crossing of the Bering Strait to the present-day United States. Instead of singling out any one specific instance or moment, I will be taking an extensive dive into a long range of historical events intended to shape a whole and complete narrative. This elaborate story will be divided into several parts, with each part consisting of many episodes. Enjoy! Columbus's famous trek across the open sea is considered one of the greatest achievements of the civilized world. But Columbus is only one part of a much larger story. The presence of human beings in the New World stretches deep into the past. Before the Italians set sail on the Santa Maria, millions of ancient peoples roamed the open plains of the two lost continents. For thousands of years they dwelled here, having no knowledge of the existence of an outside world, a world that would one day come knocking on their front door. And there is still great mystery surrounding these nomads and how they endeavored into an untamed landmass. This episode will explore these ancient wanderers, who they were, how they settled the Americas, and how they evolved into the various cultures and societies that the Europeans would one day venture to find. 25,000 years ago, the world was in the midst of what is called the last glacial maximum, where vast sheets of ice and glaciers covered much of the northern hemisphere. The advent of this particular ice age saw a significant reduction in sea levels, which opened up an immense frozen tundra that we know as the Bering Land Bridge. This massive territory was roughly twice the size of Texas and formed a solid geographical liaison between Siberia and Alaska. It is presumed that pockets of hunter-gatherer tribes migrated into the open landmass from Siberia around this time, most likely in the pursuit of migrating herbivores and perhaps even larger animals like woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, and bison, although that is still subject to debate. The environment in Beringia would have been more generous for habitation than the ice-rot milieu that these people left behind. It was warmer in some areas, and the presence of dwarf shrubs meant that they had access to wood which they could then burn to keep warm. The nomads at this time would have found it rather difficult to continue roaming east through Alaska because it was guarded by two gigantic ice walls called the Laurentide and Cordilleran ice sheets. This meant that they were forced to reside on the land bridge for an undetermined period of time. Exactly how long they stayed here is up in the air. Estimates vary from 5,000 to 10,000 years. But enough time passed so that when the ice sheets melted and the first people made that historic leap into the Americas, they were completely genetically isolated from their Eastern Asian counterparts. This hypothesis is referred to as the Beringian standstill hypothesis. The arrival of humans in Alaska occurred somewhere between 16,000 and 13,000 years ago. As the last ice age subsided and the ice sheets began to melt, the nomads were forced to sojourn eastward because the water levels increasingly threatened to submerge the land bridge, which disappeared beneath the Atlantic about 13,000 years ago. This is the most widely accepted timeline of people entering the Americas, but the discovery of human activity in places like Chile date much further back, perhaps as far back as 19,000 years. This has caused some to wonder if humans traveled to the Americas through other means since they never could have crossed those ice sheets before they melted. The first wave of natives to inhabit the Americas were called the Paleo-Indians or the Paleo-Americans. Very little is known about them except that they gradually dispersed south all the way from Alaska to Venezuela. They were primarily hunter-gatherers who preyed on mastodons, caribou, and bison. They famously wielded projectile weaponry helmed with what are called Clovis points. These are two-sided, sharp, fluted objects used primarily for distance throwing and were mounted on the heads of tools to make darts, spears, arrows, and atlatls. The employment of these primitive handmade artifacts also lent these historic tribes the name Clovis people. They presumably died out around 9,000 years ago, leaving most of their culture and daily habits behind, lost to the depths of obscurity. The extinction of the Paleo-Indians marked a dramatic shift for all life in the New World. The quest for hunting large wildlife spread the ancient natives all over the Americas, covering roughly every region from the southern point of Chile to the Arctic climate in northern Canada. Eventually, the constant plane drifting subsided when their favorite source for food in the form of megafauna, or large mammals, perished in a massive extinction period known as the Quaternary Extinction Event. Even horses fell prey to this nature-wrought plague, and the Americas would have to wait thousands of years for the Europeans to reintroduce them. This event happened between 12 and 9000 BC, and it forced the natives to embrace a more sedentary lifestyle in place of their previous nomadic one, and what became the Archaic period. The Archaic period dates between 8000 and 1000 BC, and it oversees the steady separation of tribes from each other as they begin acclimating to their specific geographical milieu. They still hunted and gathered and remained in small 20 to 50 person tribes until the tail end of this period, when it is believed that the cultivation of crops and reliance on smaller game such as deer, fish, and vegetables allowed for the population to boom. The Archaic people split into 5 predominant North American cultures based on their respective regions: the Archaic Southwest, Arctic, Poverty, Dalton, and Plano. The Archaic Southwest controlled the region that makes up most of the current-day United States Southwest. From Texas to California, these tribes are most notable for inventing basket weaving and growing corn, or maize. They occupied a large swath of land, and evidence of their existence stretches as far north as Utah and Colorado, and as far south as North Mexico. They also built shelters and residencies in the Great Canyons. The Arctic refers to those who dwelled in the Yukon, Alaska, North American Arctic, hence the name. Very little is known about them except that they relied heavily on fishing and utilized stone tools which were technologically advanced for the time. The Poverty Point culture is the classification given to the first people who thrived along the Mississippi Valley and large tracts of the northern Mexican Gulf. Their most distinguished achievements were the impressive earthworks and mounds they constructed, many of which still endure to this day. The most iconic mound is named Poverty Point and is located in northeastern Louisiana. The Daltons are best characterized by their intricate weapon designs. They developed more advanced projectile points with concave bases that had a variety of uses, such as sawing, scraping, and carving. They roamed the United States Southeast, and evidence of them has been found in North Carolina. The Plano culture refers to those who hunted and gathered across the Great Plains of the Middle United States, west of the Mississippi. They mostly preyed on bison and generated a more efficient method of hunting them, which consisted of harassing entire bison herds into a frenzy and causing them to stampede off cliff edges. Meanwhile, much further down south saw the formation of more complex civilizations where city-states with infrastructure began to emerge. In 3500 BC, while the pyramids of ancient Egypt stunned the known world, South America witnessed the rise of the Norte Chico civilization, its sophistication and architectural achievements almost rivaling the Giza necropolis. The Chico Norte civilization became the earliest known advanced society of the Americas, enduring for nearly 2,000 years. This intricate network of densely populated city centers laid the foundation for remarkable earthworks, pyramids, and intelligent governmental organization. Its capital, Harikanga, is the first city in the Americas and one of the earliest established cities in the world. It's believed that seasonal rituals and religious ceremonies were frequently hosted in Harikanga by the Norte Chico. Much of the city's earthworks and mounds have been preserved and currently serve as a popular tourist attraction. The Norte Chico mysteriously crumbled around 1800 BC. This display of advanced civilizations in the New World, particularly in South and Central America, would develop into a pattern, paving the way for more prosperous yet equally brutal societies to come. That's all for this video. I really hope you enjoyed watching, and please feel free to comment and let me know what you thought below. In my next video, I will finish up the pre-Columbian American narrative and hopefully delve into some of the early European explorers. Thank you for watching. Please feel free to like and subscribe so you can watch the next video in my series.